My name is Sandy Johnson Shadwick, and I'm your host. And for today's BeTechly Discovery Series event, we're going to be discovering how much is your data center slowing down your operations. Today, just the agenda today is going to be about a 24-minute deep dive. Your featured expert will discuss three key facets of this topic, including market data, 3-minute peer poll. Go ahead and see how you and the other attendees compare on some of the key questions. We are going to have a Q&A at the end, so stay as long as you need to, and the expert are free. Also remember what's on the screen for your reward. And today we are actually joined by Brian Olofsson, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to him.
Good afternoon, folks. My name is Brian Olofsson, and I have been with GHS for a little more than, or as Glasshouse Systems, we refer to it as GHS, for a little more than 4 years now. And my focus has and continues to be our efforts to grow our managed service and IaaS offerings within the mature platforms that we built out that we present today. GHS as a company has been in business for 31 years, having started in 1993. The company was started by ex-IBM executives, and IBM has been a core tenet of our business since day one. And so much so that an interesting fact about us is that GHS was the first business partner anywhere on the planet, and I mean that, anywhere on the planet, to be authorized by IBM to sell mainframes. Prior to us, all mainframe business was painfully executed directly with IBM. We're so still friendly ingrained with them that our senior leadership team meets with IBM's senior leadership team once a year in New York. And our executive team today is largely comprised of former IBM executives. There's a lot of deep experience of our industry inside of this company. We have over 120 employees, and of that 120, approximately 60% are technical and engineering resources. And we work with over 300 enterprise accounts. Our US head office is in Chicago, and our Canadian head office is in Toronto. I'm fond of saying that despite our size, we are very much a boutique shop. We're not generalists. We focus on specific solutions and deliverables, and what we do, we do very well. Back to you, Sandy, for the next slide.
All right. Thank you so much, Brian. All right.
And I'll take questions on the snowmobiles afterwards.
All right. So we've got a great group in the audience today. As you can see from the answer to the two kind of registration questions that you all filled out, and I'll leave this up for just a second. And now we really want to get into the deep dive. So we've actually pulled together 6 stats related to the 3 facets of this topic, and we'll ask Brian 3 questions about each of this data. So our first stat for the day is as much as 24% of organizations experience system downtime due to aged infrastructure platforms. Inefficiency can consume as much as 30% of your company's IT operating budget every year. So Brian, how can modernization of your DR improve RTO and RPO, as well as reduce the financial and operational impact of a failure?
Let me get myself off of mute there. Thanks, Sandy. And in truth, if we wanted to, we could probably spend the entire webinar just on this one question. So I'm going to pick a narrow area of this one and speak to it. And I want to talk about DR modernization and replication strategies to address as part of how you would address this. And so specifically here, I want to speak to the challenge of outage time reduction through use of a modernized DR strategy and how it can reduce the impacts of planned as well as unplanned outages. This particular discussion will be centered around IBM I and IBM AIX workloads, but really much of what I say here is 100% applicable to an x86 environment and a mainframe environment. So there's a lot of cross population in this. Traditional approaches to DR, and by that I'm meaning to restore from physical tape to a cold instance at a second site, is unfortunately still more common than it should be. And it creates very much a sense of false security as its RTO and RPO measurements, they're in days, not hours. And we can forget about the discussion of minutes on that one. And it does not provide support to an organization when it comes to reducing outage windows in the production environment. And specifically there, I'm speaking more of the planned outages that cause everybody pain. Implementation of a replication strategy will allow your DR to reduce operational outage windows and significantly reduce your RTO and your RPO measurements to the point where they are in minutes, not hours or days. GHS's DR practice is pretty significant, and we support 3 distinct replication strategies that we have proven greatly reduce your RTO and your RPO and bring your organization into better compliance around regulatory, banking, insurance demands. So the first one that we wanted to speak on briefly, and again, we could have a half-hour discussion on anything I'm going to say here in a deep dive. But the first one is backup replication. And here, what we do is our practice is to install 2 VTLs in 2 separate sites, your primary site and your DR or the secondary site. The backups are replicated using software within the replication software native within the VTL to give you near real-time replication between your primary site and your DR site for your backups. And in this world, if you have to execute a restoration of services at the second site, it can be achieved within an hour or less. And we've proven that, I can't tell you how many times, through test DRs and actual invocation of DRs. And this also allows you to be able to utilize this structure to help reduce the amount of time that your organization sees when you need to take a major planned outage of your primary site. You simply restore to the DR site, bring up services to that, let everybody work on it. You can complete whatever you've got to do in your primary site and then restore it back to the primary site afterwards. SAN replication is a second approach, and this is SAN replication between 2 distinct sites. The vast majority of our work is centered around IBM storage, and IBM has for years supported real-time site-to-site replication of SAN volumes between compatible storage arrays. And I need to stop there for a second and say that you can't create with any particular SAN product a replication between uncomplementary SAN. So I can't go from IBM to EMC, or even within the IBM family, I can't go from one particular family of IBM storage to another, such as an FS5200 to a V4500. Those 2 will not talk to each other in replication. So the limitation of this is that it has to be within a certain family of products that replicate between the 2. And it's really most cost effective and most heavily utilized in large environments. It's a bit of a tough pill to swallow financially for a much smaller environment. The big advantage of it is that if you need to declare a DR, this thing gives you darn near 0 point for RTO and RPO. You are up and running on the other site as fast as you can make the network changes. The third approach that we use is data replication. And data replication allows for real-time replication of data between your primary site and the replication target at your second site via a third-party application. Now, because it's software-based, this replication can be parsed out pretty granularly. We can replicate between internal storage and a server at the primary site to another server of a different brand at a different site, or a different design at a different site. We can replicate from an internal storage on a server to a volume on a SAN. We can replicate from a volume on a SAN to a internal storage on a server to remote site. So it's got an enormous amount of flexibility. And once it's been synchronized, the replication is as good in terms of keeping you synchronized as you would get out of SAN-based replication. It has all of those benefits, but you wind up doing it at a much reduced cost, and it's certainly the ideal approach for much smaller workloads. Here at GHS, we primarily use a product called Mimix to achieve this for both IBM I and AIX workloads. And we've also worked with other products such as Robot and Maxava. If you're in an x86 world, the principal product that we would use if you wanted to go to this level, we would be doing this with Zerto, and we have pretty significant experience with Zerto implementation and Zerto management. So we bring a tremendous amount of skill sets to this, both from a deployment perspective and from an operational perspective, to allow you to adopt any of these three DR modernization strategies. And any of them are going to save you money. They're going to improve your RTO and your RPO and give your organization significant and measurable improvements in business continuity, resiliency, and outage window reductions. So we could go on and on about this, and I would encourage anybody that wants to have a discussion with us on their particular challenges in this area. More than happy to have a second conversation with you as one-on-one about the art of what is possible. So back to you, Sandy. Next slide. Sandy, can you roll the slide?
There we go. Sorry about that. Technical difficulty there. 31% of IT leaders are looking to enhance their detection and remediation capabilities for cyber attacks or ransomware. 54% of organizations intend to switch their backup solution in 2024. Brian, what priorities should enterprises place on backup modernization this year?
Okay. Give me a quick second here. So, and this is the same thing on the cybersecurity side. We could spend hours on that. So I'm going to talk about what we see in terms of legacy environments and what they need to address going forward. And the first thing is, we're always surprised at the number of environments, IBM or otherwise, that are still backing up to physical tape. Yep. Physical tape is slow to ingest. It's operationally clumsy. It's manpower intensive. And it's difficult to highly automate. You can only automate a physical tape environment so far, and then you're looking at a lot of manual effort after that. And in addition, God forbid you have to actually execute a restore. The restores are slow and exponentially slower if the restoration target is at a second site. And tape archive must be physically moved to a third party, which is not a trivial recurring expense that you have to budget for. Our solution with this is to try to get all of our clients to move towards virtual tape libraries. And I'm not going to sit there preach brands at this point. I'm just going to talk about the benefits of VTL. Virtual tape libraries significantly reduce the time necessary to run your backups, because now you're not backing up the physical tape. You're just too flat going to a dedicated drive volume in a disk array. And these provide even greater improvements when it comes to restoration times, like shockingly better. And that's whether you're restoring locally at your primary site or remotely at the second site. The days of physically handling tape, costly third-party offsite storage is gone. It's eliminated. You can get rid of all that nonsense. Because you get rid of that, you allow for improved automation. And here's where we start to talk about some of the things where it can help you with your cybersecurity and protection strategies, because the improved automation can allow you to automate movement of historical copies to an S3 bucket, such as IBM Cloud Object Storage, or anything within Azure and AWS. And as we all know, S3 buckets are very cheap to ingest into and to keep that in there. So your cost for your archiving goes right down to the floor when compared to working with physical tape. The other advantage of a VTL is that certainly the ones that we work with, we can still put a physical tape drive on them. So physical tape still has a place in your overall backup strategy, but it's different. And what we use it for is where you need a really cost-effective air gap. And by writing a backup to physical tape for purposes of an air gap, you improve your cybersecurity posture from a DR perspective. We'll talk more on that separately. That's a whole other conversation to have. And if you want to speak to us further on this level of modernization away from physical tape and into a VTL, we have significant technical and operational experience with 4 VTL platforms. Yes, we work with IBM, but we also work with Falcon Store, we work with Cybernetics, and we work with Data Domain, and we bring a lot of experience on implementing these solutions, optimizing them, and then making them run efficiently and effectively for you. So with that, I'm going to hit the brakes on this one, and Sandy, ask you to go to the 3rd slide.
Absolutely. So this is going to take us into our final statistics as well as our final question for you. So over 66% of businesses still use mainframe or legacy apps for core business operations. However, optimizing their operational staffing requirements and costs is a rapidly increasing challenge. So Brian, how do managed services improve operational stability, platform uptime, while also reduce operational costs?
Okay, so this is really centered around staffing, which for anybody on the operational side can be the bane of your existence. Staffing is a major issue across all elements of the environment. It certainly seems to be a more prevalent one where your world has got an IBM I environment, an IBM AIX environment, or a mainframe environment. But we see it in the network side, we see it in the security side, and we actually, separate of this discussion, we have a whole managed security practice that has been growing exponentially because of those, in large part because of those staffing challenges. But going back to the world of IBM I, AIX, and mainframe, what we see is that generally speaking, when looking at small, to medium-sized IBM I and AIX environments, the administrator role is nowhere near an FTE. Like you don't need 40 hours a week to do the administrator work of this environment. And that's not just the OS, that's the infrastructure as well, even if it includes dedicated SAN, dedicated backup, etc. And typically it's more like a 0.2 or a 0.3 FTE if we measure that effort on a weekly basis. So if we put aside the issue of candidate availability if you're seeking an individual, which is a challenge for everyone, let's just focus on skill sets for a minute. And by and large, organizations, and when it comes to skill sets up in these environments, they end up in one of 2 scenarios. The first scenario being that you have a candidate or team member who has multiple non-IBM skill sets you can use across other parts of your environment, but the individual has got barely enough IBM skill sets to get literally to keep the lights on in the IBM environment, let alone deal with a failure, a hiccup, a job running amok, etc. The second scenario, you wind up with a candidate or team member who is quite skilled on the IBM side, but that's all they got. Their skill sets outside of IBM are minimal to non-existent. So what are you going to do with them when they're not working on the IBM environment that you've hired them for? Neither scenario is a good fit, and both represent really an expensive compromise that a lot of companies struggle to get out from underneath of. And the problem only becomes worse where you have a sole resource for this IBM environment, and that resource retires or otherwise leaves the organization. And now you have to deal with these issues in the context of going to market to hire an individual to replace them. So you have a single resource in your barn that is less than an optimal fit for your organization's needs. And now add to that the challenge of resourcing, that challenge of resourcing to accommodate for vacations, illness, unplanned time off, and off hours, weekend requirements. It only compounds the problem. How does an organization manage the environment, which is crucial to them, when they only have one resource, and if that resource is for whatever reason above, they're not available? And the solution to that conundrum is to bring your infrastructure and OS administration under a managed service practice. This solves literally all of the above operational issues and more, with the added organizational benefits that comes from stronger operational disciplines, skill set currency, and access to multiple resources that a managed service practice will bring to your organization. We have seen time after time with clients that the positive impacts from this engagement, they're almost immediate, like within 2 weeks type of thing. They're already seeing real improvements on how the place is running. And those operational benefits, they're quickly measurable. So I've gone through this one fairly quickly. In fact, I've gone through more because I'm hoping that our aim here is to encourage question and answer. And there is much more to talk here on this particular topic as well as the other two. And in all three cases, each of your challenges, they are different. No two are going to be even close to remotely the same. Everybody is different. And we're more than happy to discuss your particular situation in a one-on-one call and talk about what is the art of the possible to solve the particular challenge or challenges that you face. So with that, I'm going to finish my speech. I know Sandy allowed for 24 minutes, but I'm more of a fan of keeping it into the 15-minute range and not putting people to sleep. So Sandy, I want to hand it back to you, hand the webinar back to you for now, and let you move on to the next step.
Brian, thank you so much for walking us through this topic. Now we'd like to hear from the audience. Please take the peer poll that's going to be posted in just a couple of seconds here. Gives you a chance to win $100, and it lets us hear from you. It should be up on your screen now. Okay, so I'm seeing some kind of early questions coming on here, and it looks like getting a lot of priorities are modernizing legacy systems infrastructure this year. Brian, what's your take on that?
Well, you need to. Depending on the your particular environment, and here again, I have to emphasize the fact that everybody's challenge is going to be different. But I will perhaps maybe address it through an example of a particular organization that we're working with now. They're going to remain nameless, but they hired us to do two things. We were hired to manage their environment because they have all of these skill set problems that we talked about, as well as to modernize it because they were running on a very old version of IBM I in a Power 7 environment, which is 13 years old. They hadn't done a full restore, let alone a reboot, in over 3 years. So we took, they had a backup. We took the machine down to do the restart and do the firmware updates. And it's at that point they found out that their system had an irretrievable failure of a virtual disk, and that we wound up spending 10 days rebuilding the entire environment. Had they kept this thing up to date, had they kept their environment up to date, had they had the requisite skill sets in-house to manage this, they would not have gone through that particular failure, and service delivery would not have been uninterrupted for 10 days. So you do need to modernize yourself. You need to keep yourself current with your OS versions. You need to keep your machines current with, and this is across more than just IBM I and AIX. But it is absolutely paramount, and companies have sweated a lot of their assets for altogether too long and gotten away with it. But as this client proved, the more you sweat the asset, the longer you kick the issue of doing the upgrades down the road, the greater the chances you're going to get bit. And when you get bit, it hurts. And this is a great example of why you do need, and certainly, if any of you need assistance in building a business case internally to management to justify that, I'm more than willing to help sit down and help you write that. And I can give you all kinds of real world examples of how organizations that have kept kicking the cat down the road, as the saying goes, got hurt and said I should never have put myself in this position. So there, Sandy, back to you.
Thank you.
As an
Okay, so
aside,
we
since we've
do
taken over,
have
one
we
of
do have
the
some time for Q&A.
Yep.
Remember, you can stay as long as you're available. Brian has graciously agreed to stay for, an additional 10 to 15 minutes to answer as many of your questions as he can. If you do need to leave, make sure that you take a call from the connections team to complete your 1-minute verification so that we can also send you a reward. So it looks like you can also schedule a call, as Brian mentioned, one-on-one. And it looks like the first question, oh boy, that we have from the audience. Let's see here. I'll try to read this as best I can. We have an application that runs on AS400 and the OS is at V7R2, which is now unsupported. Can you speak to what my upgrade options are?
Yep. So we run into this weekly. It's if misery loves company, don't worry about it. You got lots of company. The path is generally the same for most. If you're on V7R2, I suspect that the most you're running is probably on a Power 8. You don't if you're on a Power 8, you don't immediately need to jump to a Power 10, which is the current version that's available from IBM. We can modernize your OS and bring you under a supported version of the OS within the Power 8. We do it as an upgrade in place. What we will do is we will build a new partition that has we establish V7R4 on that because you can only jump 2 paths. You can't go directly to V7R5 if you're at R2. You have to go to R4 first. R4 is going to buy you 3-4 years before you need to go to R5. And we would test the application, do a test restore multiple times to ensure the application is running properly on V7R4, obviously correct anything that we see. We then do our end user acceptance testing on that test partition. And once you sign off on that, we would then pick a date, pick a time. It'll be a weekend. We would shut down the application on V7R2 after we take a full save 21, execute or restore on the new partition, and bring the application back up and running on the new partition in V7R4, point everybody to it, execute that test plan once again to ensure that it's working, and on Monday morning or whenever people first start to log in the system, everything will appear as it was before. They'll have no idea they're running on a new OS, and now you have a fully supported OS on your environment. So again, we're happy to talk about your particular challenges on that one if you're into that situation or if you're in a much older one. And we've got one client, by the way, that is, believe it or not, is running on a 25-year-old version of AS400. It's a true AS400. It's version 4 of the OS. And we're doing this right now with them. We're going to jump them 25 years in the space of about a month and a half. So there's lots of skill set here. There's lots of understanding and knowledge about how to successfully pull this off with minimal impact to the business. Hopefully that to that individual that asked that question, it answers it and it spurs a further conversation. Anything else in there, Sandy?
We do. So this one is, I have an application running on IBM AIX and have been tasked with looking at cloud options for it. What can you tell me regarding moving this to the cloud?
Oh my! So the person that wrote this question, you're the glutton for punishment on pursuing the cloud side for this. It's actually not that bad. A lot of people. The big thing to understand is that IBM AIX workloads don't run natively within most public clouds, and by that I'm pointing specifically at Google, AWS, and Azure. They'll link into some third-party organizations that do put this in a cloud for you, but it's clumsy and it's messy. You really From a cleanliness of function, you have two options. The first one is the IBM Cloud, where AIX is a native offering in there. They're obviously just the same as you get with a Microsoft or a Linux world where you're trying to run it in one of the public cloud providers. You have to be up to a certain level of OS standard, et cetera, database standard, and so on, in order to be able to run it in the IBM Cloud. But it can be done effectively, efficiently. It's no longer a science experiment. IBM has got a surprisingly large cloud business centered around that. And increasingly, as they bring clients into this discussion about moving their workloads off-prem and into the cloud, be it fully cloud or a hybrid cloud, they're turning to GHS to assist with that. And in fact, actually lead it. I'd like to say we're probably their lead partner in North America, not just Canada or just the US, but all across North America, for leading these integrations of IBM workloads into the IBM Cloud for both AIX and for IBM I. If it's mainframe, I'd rather leave that discussion one-on-one. There's a lot of complexity about getting mainframe into a multi-tenant environment. So that's a bit of a messier dive. Where the workload, you work through the study with IBM, and that workload doesn't appear to be cost effective in the IBM Cloud for a plethora of reasons. The other option you've got is the GHS runs its own private cloud for smaller workloads, legacy workloads, workloads that have to be kept alive for audit and compliance purposes, but they're no longer active or production workloads. And we can put those into a private cloud. And a lot of times with those smaller environments, we're actually more cost effective. So yes, it is a bit of a challenge to work with getting these workloads into the cloud, but you do have options, and the options are not science experiments. They are tried, tested, and true. They're proven. They work. So hopefully I've answered your question enough so that it creates a follow-on discussion. Sandy, anything else there?
No, it looks like we have a couple of us for follow-up on. So going to go ahead and say thank you, everyone, for joining us today, especially Brian. Thank you so much for this vibrant discussion and discovery. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Yep.
Bye now.
Exactly. Wonderful.